Commissioners, in its report, the tree panel, in considering its recommendations, recognized that there was a need to find a balance between system reliability, safety, and the aesthetics and good health of the trees. So in looking at moving forward and how to best move forward, the recommendations of the panel tried to find the appropriate balance, and in doing so, recommended that a number of our standards be maintained and that other standards be modified. So I'm going to spend the first few minutes on this first slide going through that in a little bit of detail. First and foremost, I guess the thing that most impacts the way we conduct our vegetation management program is the standard that we use for pruning. The panel did recommend that we continue to use the lateral pruning method as recommended by the National Arbor Day Foundation. That's the method that's recommended and recognized as the best approach to protecting tree health. What it means is that when you prune the limb or the tree, you go not to just the point where you need to go to achieve the minimum clearance required, but you go to the proper lateral beyond that point to make your pruning cut. Now, since the lateral that's recommended in that situation and the minimum clearance seldom, if ever, coexist at the same location, what it means is that we usually prune beyond the point of achieving our minimum clearances. The panel recognized that, but the panel also thought that it was important that we maintain that standard that's in recognition of the health of the tree. So they recommended that we continue with the national standard that we've been using now for several years. As far as minimum clearances are concerned, we maintain two different clearances on our lower voltage 13 kV lines, the distribution system lines that go throughout our system, go through the neighborhoods, serve the individual homes. We maintain a 10-foot clearance. On the higher voltage, more critical 69 kV lines that transmit power between our substations, we maintain a 25-foot clearance. The panel recommended that those clearance standards remain in place going forward as well. They also, though, recommended a number of modifications to existing standards or to existing practices, one of which has to do with slow-growing species. Currently today, we will make exceptions for slow-growing species and modify the amount of clearance that we require, generally on those circuits that are pre-planned. When a forester goes house to house, if you will, yard to yard, looking at the trees, pre-planning what's to be cut and preparing a manifest or instructions to the crews to do that work, those low-growing species are generally identified and taken into consideration in that process. Going forward, though, in response to the panel's recommendations, we'll expand that and we'll do more training with our contractors, give more flexibility and decision-making to them in the field to make those calls on their own when they're dealing with slow-growing species of trees on non-pre-planned circuits. So we'll see more of that in use as we go forward. So subordinate pruning is something that we have not typically used in the past or used very, very rarely. Subordinate pruning is a modified approach to getting back to the point where you need to be. Rather than going back to the appropriate lateral as defined by ANSI A300 in the typical lateral pruning method, you can stop on an interim basis at a weaker lateral. And then later, a year later, or maybe at the end of the pruning cycle when you're back through there again, you go back to the proper lateral and you achieve the same cut, but you do it over a period of time so that you in essence have reduced the amount of pruning on any given cycle. So you can basically two-step the work to get back to the point where you need to be. We've used that very seldom in the past. We will use that more going forward where it's appropriate. It is a way of minimizing or reducing some of the visual impact of removing all of that canopy in a single pruning cycle, instead stretching it out over 2 cycles to achieve the same result. Overhang removal, we have been removing not just the limbs that are within the 10 feet or the 25 feet zones that I talked about earlier, but all of the overhang over the lines. We've done that because of the impact that can occur if winds or rain or ice or snow or something of that nature bring those overhanging limbs down into our wires and create outages. The panel recommended that we continue to remove that overhang on those very critical 69 kV lines, but that we modify that and no longer remove the overhang on the 2-phase, 3-phase, single-phase lines that are the 13 kV lines, the distribution system lines in the neighborhoods. Clearly, everyone recognizes that creates a little more risk for reliability and more risk for outages, but it will have a big impact on aesthetics and the tree canopy in the community. And the recommendation which we've accepted is to, as long as there is, the overhang is healthy, as long as there's no evidence of disease or weak limb structure, we will leave that overhang going forward. Also, on neutrals, we've had a standard 10-foot clearance on neutrals, just like we have on the rest of our wires. Going forward, we will reduce that, as the tree panel recommended, down to 5 feet. And on streetlight wires and guy wires, where we've had a 5-foot clearance radius around those lines, we will no longer remove that unless that vegetation is in contact or in some way threatening that guy wire or that streetlight wire. So those are some big changes. Those, particularly those last 4 on that table, are big changes that will have a significant impact on the visual quality of the pruning. It will have a visual impact on the aesthetics and on the amount of canopy that is removed or will remain, as the case may be, going forward.
Bill, on the overhang, do we have any idea what that might cause in terms of outages by leaving that?
We really don't. I mean, it's hard to quantify at this point how many more outages may occur as a result of that, or what the reliability numbers will do. Clearly, there will be some impact. We'll be able to perhaps get a better feel for that as we go forward, and we can look back at our historical numbers and look at the results going forward. We'll try to do some evaluation to be able to better quantify that, but at this point, other than saying it will clearly have an impact, we don't think it's going to be, it will be probably measurable, but I don't think it's going to be something that's going to double the outage numbers that we're seeing today. Nothing of that magnitude.
Do you know if other utilities are doing that?
It's a mixed bag. Some utilities remove all overhang, others do not. We haven't always done that. It was a recommendation by one of the national experts that we brought in a few years ago, who looked at our system, looked at our program, and made the recommendation that we begin to remove all overhanging limbs. So it's something that is discretional across the country. Some utilities remove them all, some do not. It's kind of like the clearance standards. There is no one national clearance standard. Every utility is free to set it for themselves. Some have a lot more clearance than we do. Some have a little bit less.
Bill, just so I understand one more time, if our clearance is 10 foot on distribution lines and the ANSI standard is for lateral pruning, that prune or cut could be 15 or 20 feet versus what our clearance might say, just because that's what the lateral pruning method is going to say.
That's correct. Depending upon the type of tree and the structure of the tree, that proper lateral may be all the way back at the main leader, may be back at the trunk of the tree, or it may be just a few feet beyond where we are. It just depends upon the type of tree and the tree structure. But very seldom is it going to be right at the point where we achieve our required minimum clearance.
And could you, or maybe Liz could tell us, what's examples of slow-growing species around here?
Magnolia would be one, probably the most, yeah, hollies, magnolias, probably the most prevalent that we run into.
Bill, 2 things. Going to the
about this overhang. I know you'll do this, but I would like, how soon after, if we adopted this, how soon do we start? Immediately? On the things that we can start immediately, like the overhang?
On the overhang, it's going to depend on where we are in our pruning cycles. Some of it will have to wait until the new contracts are signed in June. Others on our pre-planning circuits, we'll start already planning those out and making sure that in the pre-planning process we take that into consideration. But for all practical purposes, the latest any circuit would see the effect of this would be beginning July 1.
And I know that you all do this, but I would hope that when you come back and report on the progress of this in general, that would be one thing specifically that you would let us know. Is this part of it working or not working? Is it resulting in a significant cost difference? The other thing on the subordinate pruning, you talked about that we would come back, we would do less of a trim, and then we'd come back in a year and maybe do a little more trim. Are there any places that we prune on an annual basis as opposed to a?
No, we do not currently have any cycle that's as short as a 1 year cycle. So what we will be doing is, to the extent we're using the subordinate pruning, we'll be making a decision based on the type of tree, the location of the pruning cut, the health of the tree, and other factors to determine, can we wait until the normal cycle to come back and do that? Do we need to do it sooner than that? I think most folks would recommend you not wait 3 to 4 years to do it simply because of the potential impact on tree health. So we'll be making those kinds of determinations, and to the extent that we do, there will be some return trips that wouldn't otherwise occur, and some cost associated with that. But at this point, it's hard to predict what that might be, not knowing for sure how often this particular option will be utilized and the customers will want us to do it in this manner.
I would have some concern if we were doing it on a frequent basis and we were having to now go to 1 year cycles through a lot of years as opposed to our normal 3 or 4 year cycle.
I think the most likely times and places you'll see this used will be when customers are concerned about the immediate effects of the pruning, and they're concerned about wanting to minimize the initial cut and the visual impact it will have, and would like to at least postpone or delay some of that. Other than that, I think most customers will be willing to go ahead and just go ahead and do it as we have in the past and not two-step it. Because that's, in essence, is what you're doing. You're just delaying the ultimate pruning point that has to be made and the pruning cut that will be made.
So you're saying that's an option, we'll go there and try to do it like we have been, and if the customer has an issue, then it'll work out with it this way, we may have to come back.
That's exactly correct.
But we're not gonna do this today.
No, our standard will still be to maintain the lateral pruning method. This will be an option to work with customers when they express a concern to that.